하대다 되는 로중 강배에 공사탕지라 저당가 되는 예몽바 동하다 되는 나사 강 정나의 생긴게 나사 동하 예몽바 당지 나라는 것을 또바디에 때문에 되는 나사 동동 예몽바 당 송집자 랑도 쳐라서 다들 공도 휴선바 로중가 변변나
Whoever sets out to practice mind training, whatever individual should decide to do so, predominantly has to learn how to take all sorts of difficult situations into consideration and how to bring them onto the path. Whatever difficulties, whatever problems, whatever disagreeable circumstances they might meet, they have to learn how to employ them, how to make them into something useful, and on top of that they also have to give rise to the wish from the bottom of their hearts that not only whatever disagreeable circumstances they might endure themselves may come to fruition, but that the causes for such conditions to be perceived, to be encountered by other beings, may also come to fruition within their own perception, within their own experiencing of such circumstances. That is the authentic way, the proper way in which someone who endeavors to follow the Bodhisattva path, who endeavors to follow the path of mind training, should train himself or herself for that matter. There is yet another word from the teachings of mind training, again from Atisha, in which it roughly says, when even the world and its contents arise as obstacles or enemy or hindrances, that is that which has to be brought onto the path. That means to say, when we encounter whatever outer circumstances may come together in a harmful, negative way, that we have to proceed accordingly, as we have heard about this so many times. Sometimes there are such outer hindrances of the elements, such as storms or flood catastrophes, such as earthquakes or the fear from fires and all the like. And sometimes also the beings that inhabit that world arise as enemies or arise as obstacles, so to speak. All of this is to be brought onto the path according to the method of mind training, as we have heard already. All of this is to be viewed in the according way and is to be employed as a means upon that path.
Njipa non drova. Njipa on drova. Tatenda gashi yonge. Temado Maronton, then top shepherd yore. Top shepherd yo, then Yamina, then in Jipa to chop to you.
Sometimes the elements arise as enemies, so to speak, in such a powerful way that there's hardly anything left but simply to be petrified with fear. And for those who do not know about these means that we hear about here, that is for the most part actually what they do. What else could they do? But for those of us who are familiar with these means, who have a teacher, who have a root lama to pray to, who have familiarized themselves with the practice of a meditational deity, a so-called Yinam deity, for those of us who are familiar with such means, it is said that we could use any such moment of fear in the face of such problems like elements, fires, flood waves, or whatever. We could use these moments in order to utilize that fear and to pray to our lamas, to pray to our Yidam deities in order to protect us from the terror that we feel in the face of, that we experience in the face of such great problems, of such circumstances as even the elements themselves rising up against ourselves. In this way, we could make use of even such situations and turn them into a means of furthering our practice, furthering, bringing them onto the path of God. A further word of Atisha, again from the text of mind training that describes the mind training, goes roughly: recognizing all appearances and phenomena that might arise as enemies as the four Buddhakayas, the four Buddha bodies. Recognizing them to be empty in this way is the foremost, or is the greatest protection of all. Now, whenever we find ourselves in such disagreeable circumstances, we could not only examine that which we perceive right now, but we could take it all the way to the examination of our own mind nature that does perceive. And we would find whatever it is that we thoroughly examine to be empty of any self-nature, empty of any substance whatsoever. That the fact that whatever we examine in this way will turn out to be empty, that is nothing other but the Dharmakaya. Yet whatever it is that we find ourselves confronted with, even though we have recognized it to be empty, it still clearly appears to us. Having recognized its empty nature does not make its appearance go away. That clear appearance is nothing other but the Sambhogakaya. So in this way, it is empty, yet at the same time clearly appearing. These two summarized into one, that is what is called the Nirmanakaya. And if one were to look at this entire, trinity of Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya, one would come to recognize them as inseparable. And the inseparability of these three is nothing other but that which is called the Svabhavikakaya, or the essence kaya, or the essence body. So in this way, here we have the four Buddhakayas, or the four Buddha bodies. Now how does it come about that recognizing things as empty in this way is a protection? If we were to come to realize on the one hand clearly appearing, yet on the other hand utterly empty nature of whatever it is that we find ourselves confronted with, well, then it goes without saying, we clearly have no more reason to be afraid, to experience fear in the face of whatever it is that we confront. We recognize its empty nature, we recognize that it's potentially not harmful in any which way, and therefore we are protected from whatever harm. Of course, needless to say, such examination, such practice will not work out right away from the start, and we will occasionally find ourselves trying to practice in the face of whatever happens in such a way, and we might start out in rather a relaxed way, but still things keep appearing to us, still things keep seemingly to be threatening, so we may eventually fall back into this experience of fear. What remains to be done in this moment is just to continue to relax again and look at things as they truly are. There is nothing else left to be done. We experience whatever circumstance, whatever situation we find ourselves in anyway. But since that is the case, and there's no way to escape from it in the first place, why not try this way of looking at things? In this way, recognizing the four Buddhakayas, or four Buddha bodies, in whatever it is that we have to confront, and recognizing them to be empty, these situations, these circumstances of any self-nature. In this way, we are supremely protected.
That's a needing to think in Nepal party, the Rawat round the jet. Jay sentient Tangi Jang, then sentient Benata, Jay sentient Tangi, Somba Mandrava Mumbo Yori. Then Ben Naranto, Maranga Pa, sentient Pento Yapo, the Tiona. Sula Kura, never show Chambu, the Siondrava. Maranga sentient Yangela. Mo Nyambata, then Koranga, Debata, Gavik, Mumbo, Puna, Sulangala, Mepa Mumbo, Yungenda. Marontonga, Hala, Sentina, Tenipena, that Zevik, Samdon Dembekon, Ropin, Kasi, Top of Ropin Sinaya, Sula, then Kugan, Ajardon, Todu, going, then Le, Depa Mega Mumbo, Yungita, Tenda, Yungre. Tenga Yundu, Tati Gabla, then Kungala, Nepati Songaram Shadam Kiena, then is on Sugar Santa Te as Menjuari, Te and the Te Tangi, King member, the song Sugar, Rondo, Jurgu, so on.
Now, this is the way how to deal with outer circumstances, with situations in which, for instance, the elements themselves arise or present themselves as a danger, something that causes us fear, causes us panic. But then, occasionally, it is also the inhabitants of this world that arise as obstacles or enemies or however we want to turn them. And it is particularly painful if we find ourselves confronted with someone towards whom we always have practiced kindness, someone whom we have helped in any which way, someone whom we have extended our kindness, our patience, and whatever it is towards. More often than not, it happens that such a person all of a sudden, for no apparent reason, acts in a negative, in a harmful way towards us. Or if it is someone to whom we have always been behaving in a very friendly, in a very courteous manner, all of a sudden such a person has nothing but negative, but harmful, painful words for us, talking to us in a harsh way, and so forth. In such situations, the customary reaction would be to react with anger, to become angry, to become cross with such a person, and for the most part to repay them in kind. It goes without saying that such behavior is of course not compatible with the way of a bodhisattva. Even if such obstacles, such problems arise, even if those towards whom we have been kind, towards whom we have been patient and understanding and helpful, even if such a person or persons should not repay us in kind, but should act in negative ways, should behave harshly or arrogantly towards us, even then we should know how to learn how to deal with such anger that could arise within ourselves, that kind of emotion that would lead us to repay in kind instead of just remaining patient and just putting on a smile instead of reacting in the same angry way. Particularly if we find ourselves in a situation when such a person towards whom we have been kind and patient reacts or acts in an angry, in an insulting or harmful way towards us, there are either usually two reactions which that would trigger within ourselves. Either we flare up in anger, or we feel discouraged, we feel resignation. But there's actually no cause for either of these two reactions. We have heard the corresponding instructions on how someone on the Bodhisattva path deals with such situations, and we have also time and again heard instructions on cause and effect. Rather than feeling either angry or feeling discouraged in such a situation, we should rather remind ourselves of the fact that the very reason that we experience such a situation can only be that we ourselves have caused this situation in the past. We ourselves have done something to that person, very likely the same such thing, that is only being repaid in kind to us now. So that is the fundamental situation which the entire situation arises out of in the first place. On top of that, it also should appear very clearly that when we feel angry or when we feel discouraged in such a situation, this only happens because we still hang on to that thing which we call a self, which we call an ego. We still seem to think that there is such a thing, and we still seem to think that we have to do something to protect that ego from harm. So still, of course, there is this ego clinging. Equally, as we have learned, there is no such thing, so why on earth would we have to protect something that is non-existent in the first place? In this way, we might bring this situation onto the path as well, by way of reminding ourselves of these simple yet always valid facts.
Tige lane pa majaba. Then Naru Datan Zambala in Yumari Sami Zepa Gamba Yimina. Then Zepa Gamba top Latin, Naranga Sanjiki, Dipatrova, the Junzi, Hipa Tondondu. The Latin, then in Napa Sankin, Tamani, Tetanki Marontona, Garden Chimbori. The Latin, Naran Dipa Yang Tapa, Targan, Tenda Song.
Our teacher continues to say, train yourself in viewing everything and all others as being extremely kind towards you. Now, if we find ourselves in the described situation, instead of flaring up in anger or becoming discouraged about the situation, we could remind ourselves that the very fact that we feel hurt, the very fact that we feel we have to do something to defend ourselves against that situation or the person that causes the situation or whatever, the very fact that this is the case is the very point. It only shows us that we still hang on to that seemingly existent yet non-existent ego, that we still cling on to that thing which we term a self, and that we still hanker after the mistaken belief that there is something that has to be protected, something that has to be defended from harm, etc. Now we have learned that this is not the case, therefore some such behavior is utterly unnecessary. Rather than flaring up angrily, lashing out, trying to repay the person who causes us grief in kind, we should consider such situations and such persons as extremely kind towards us. Then how, let's face it, in the absence of such situations and people, how on earth could we practice patience in the first place? It would just not be possible. Therefore, we have again and again, time and again, we find ourselves in a situation that gives rise to the practice of patience, which is so utterly and extremely beneficial. And again, as we are being given that chance, rather than striking back, we should be thankful, and we should consider those who provide us with that opportunity as being extremely kind towards us. Similarly, we should proceed whenever we find ourselves in the face of pain and sickness. Whenever we encounter such obstacles, such problems like a particular sickness with its corresponding pains, for the most part, of course, we will first consult some sort of a medical practitioner, some doctor, or whatever, in order to be given medical attention, in order to heal the sickness and its causes in this way. But very often, as we all know, that does not always work out according to our desire. And then we might also eventually go into the presence of a teacher whom we trust and ask for further instructions on how to deal with such a situation. In many cases, as we all know, we will then often receive instructions from such a lama, from such a master, as the repetition of mantras or certain meditation instructions, etc. And we may use them together with whatever medical attention we receive in order to get through the sickness. Again, this is then a situation in which we can train ourselves. It is the sickness itself, the pain that we perceive itself, that actually gives rise to our practicing some such method. And in the end, when the problem has subsided, when the sickness is being healed, when we're free of sickness and pain again, then indeed we could view this situation as having been a great opportunity, as having been a very good possibility for further practice. And this way we can bring even the sickness itself onto the path, the pain that we feel, and we can make even such adverse circumstances into something very useful. So up until now, we have heard instructions from Rinpoche on how to implement the practice of sending and taking, and how to deal with such difficult situations on the path, and all of this according to the words of Atisha. All the various methods that have been described so far, Rinpoche has explained in detail, and within the actual texts that we use as the basis for the teaching here, we have come to the fourth verse, in which towards the end it says, bringing about and giving rise initially to great compassion, great benefit is being brought about for oneself and others. So whatever instructions Rinpoche has been explaining up until the present moment, all of that comes, all of that pertains to these particular words of Atisha himself. This is how far we've got so far.
사자 전부 감발한테 semkiti padrova tangi ta chukognando chorvatela rangdan pason chopare 당아로 런던 파송도 chukognando chortsani teni zuko namba ni 저기 teni 롱제도 고장 트르고 니기 teni 생진 tangi 호안 타 마동거 봐 생진게 된 자체 문제도 대 송조게 sem게 님도 송조
Practicing the Bodhisattva path in this way, we will then eventually achieve the complete awakening or enlightenment of Buddhahood. Achieving the awakening of Buddhahood means that we have rid ourselves of every veils and obscurations, even of the most subtle kind. There's no veil or obscuration left whatsoever. Having achieved that state, which is also known as Mahamudra, we have achieved that which is known as the Dharmakaya. Having achieved this realization of Dharmakaya is also called the perfect benefit for oneself. So achieving such enlightenment of Buddhahood, that is the benefit that is being brought about for oneself. At the same time, one also manifests the unceasingly active two form bodies, or form kayas as they are called, which are the Sambhogakaya and the Nirmanakaya. These two kayas, or with these two kayas, one will then unceasingly without let-up, without interruption, be benefiting other beings for as long as there are beings to be benefited. In this way, the perfect benefit for others is being brought about. And all of this, the achievement of perfect benefit for oneself, which is the realization of Dharmakaya, as well as the manifestation of perfect benefit for others, which is the two form kayas of Sambhogakaya and Nimanakaya, all of that only comes to pass through the practice of bodhicitta, through the practice of the awakened heart or of the enlightened attitude in the first place. Without bodhicitta, no such realization. Again, there are 15 minutes for questions.